Joe of the Chalet School, Chapter 5. New Interests. Gisela, do stop a minute. I want to speak to you. Gisela Marini halted and turned round to see Joey Bettany racing after her. I'm sorry, Joey, she said, as the younger girl reached her. I did not know you were following me. Of course you didn't. I say, are you in a hurry? 'Cause if not, I want to speak to you. Yes? What is it? Some important event you wish to celebrate? No fear. It's nothing like that. Only do you remember the book you showed me last term? Somebody or other of the fourth? Yes, said Gisela. It was from that book we took our idea of celebrating Madame's birthday. Ah, so it was. I'd forgotten that. By the way, what was the name of the girl? Her name was Denise. But do you wish to read it? I will ask Mamma to post it for you, if you like. Thanks awfully, but I'd rather not. It looked awfully tosh, really. No, all I meant was about the school magazine. What about it? Gisela had frowned at the word tosh, which sounded to her uncommonly like forbidden slang, but now her frown vanished as she exclaimed, Of course, I had not forgotten. But we are always so busy. I know we are. The bell will ring for Mitte Jensen in a minute. Oh, Gisela, do get started. There's a Jim. I should like a magazine, said Gisela thoughtfully. How shall we begin? I should call a meeting and ask the others, said Joey promptly. My idea is, ask the day girls to come tomorrow morning at 9, just like ordinary school days, and hold a meeting in the dining room. I'm sure my sister would agree. She said she might have a magazine last term, said Gisela. I will ask her if we all may call the meeting. If she gives permission, we will do as you suggest, and perhaps we may begin this term. Good, that's splendid of you, Gisela. You are a gem. And there goes the bell. Come on, I'll race you back. Gisela, however, as head girl, had a certain amount of dignity to uphold, and she refused the challenge, so Joey set off by herself and arrived at the chalet panting for breath. Her sister was standing at the lakeside, looking at the gray waters, and raised startled eyes as she dashed up. Joe, why are you racing about like that? It's enough to start you coughing again. But it hasn't, retorted Joe with perfect truth. I say, do you think there was going to be a storm coming up? I don't know. The lake looks rather like it. I've a good mind to send the Himmels and the Rincinis home now. They all have to go to the Tortswald, since the Hamels have had the turn out of the chalet by the post, and if the wind comes, it will blow from northeast, and that means wave breaking on the path if there's a strong wind. Well, before you do send them home, Gisela wants to know if we may have a meeting tomorrow to discuss the magazine, said Joey eagerly. Don't you, Gisela? Gisela, who had come up in time to hear the last sentence, smiled. If we may, madame, it might be well. See, it is now October, and we should begin at once. Miss Bettany nodded. Yes, if you want a magazine this year, you certainly ought to begin now. Have the meeting tomorrow by all means. I am going to send the Hamels and the Rincinis home now, as I think we are going to have a storm, so come along and tell them. The second bell sounded at that moment, so Gisela, flinging her dignity to the wind, raced into the house to find the 4 day girls who lived at the Tortswald, a little village beyond Seespitz, and bid them come next morning for the meeting. Her head mistress followed to send them home. The news of the meeting thrilled the girls enormously, and they could talk of nothing else. Even the rising of the storm scarcely distracted their attention. After Mitte Jensen, Gisela ran across to Le Petit Chalet to let the juniors know about it. Coming back, she could scarcely keep her feet. In that narrow valley the wind roars down as though a funnel, and its violence is doubled. The lake was already covered with white-capped waves, and dashed themselves against the shore. bespattering the path with spray and foam. "Isn't it a good thing," said Joey as she struggled with her sewing, "that the Hamels have left Scholastica? It would have been an awful walk." "They couldn't have come every day," replied Juliet. "Either they've had to be boarders or they'd have to have a governess. Now the steamers have stopped." "The railway will have closed in the fortnight's time," put in Gisela. "After that we shall have to take the mountain path when we want to go to Sparts." "Coo! Won't it be cheery with snow?" commented Joey. "You know what the winter is like here, Gisela." "You'd better write an article on it for the magazine," suggested Juliet. "Lots of us have no idea." "You will know when this term has reached its end," laughed Gisela, as she laid aside her own beautifully done work to see what Joe was doing. "Why, what's wrong?" demanded the owner of the work. "It's quite neat, and the stitches are nearly all the same size." "But it's the wrong stitch," wailed Gisela. "Give me your scissors." "Oh, I say," protested Joe, "you're not going to take it out, are you?" "But it cannot remain like that. It's all wrong. It will spoil the garment." "Well, I don't mind that. I'd rather it be spoiled altogether as to have to do the horrid thing all over again. I simply loathe sewing," retorted Joe, who, till the last term, had scarcely ever touched a needle. To the foreign girls this was a shocking state of affairs. They could all do exquisite plain sewing themselves, and the older ones at least embroidered beautifully. Juliet, Margia, and Rosalie were the only ones among the English girls whose work would pass muster with Mademoiselle. Joey and Grizel Cochrane were considered worse than the juniors, and the American child, Evandine, had scarcely known one end of the needle from the other when she first came. Some of the older girls had promptly constituted themselves teacher to Grizel and Joey in the previous term, and Bernhilda did her best for Evandine, who hated sewing even more than Joey did, and did everything she could to get out of it. On Mondays and Wednesdays a book was read, but on Fridays discipline was somewhat relaxed, and the girls were allowed to talk so long as they spoke English and did not make too much noise over it. "I must send a copy of the Chaletian to England to my old school," said Joey, as she resignedly watched Gisela snip out her stitches. "They'll be awfully interested. I wonder who'll be editor." "It ought to be one of you English," replied Gisela, rethreading Joe's needle and beginning to work again. "See, Joey, I have begun for you, making your stitches thus, and keep them very even, please." "Well, I'll try," sighed Joey, "but I shall never sew like that." "You will if you try," returned her friend. "See, I have made them a little larger than usual, so you may keep yours the same size." Joey took her work and stitched slowly, while Gisela, who was doing elaborate smocking on a frock intended for her little sister, went on with her own. "We must have a page for correspondence," observed Juliet presently. "Oh, rather. I think someone ought to write a description of the picnic we took last term," added Joey. "Herr Minch told us some jolly legends about the mountains, too. I should think someone might write out at least one of them. Bernhilda could do that." "Please hold up your work," Mademoiselle said at this juncture. "What are we going to do, Mademoiselle?" asked Joey eagerly. "We can't go out today." "Miss Durand is coming to teach you a new dance," replied Mademoiselle. "Please carry all the chairs into that little classroom and leave this one empty." In less than 10 minutes the big double form room was cleared of all chairs save the one at the piano, and the girls stood ready, wondering what this new dance might be. They knew very little of Miss Durand, really. She came over to the chalet 2 afternoons in the week and taught them drawing, but otherwise they rarely saw her. They looked at her with interest as she came into the room, followed by Miss Bettany, who was carrying some music. "All ready?" That's right, said Miss Durant briskly. Will you please get partners and then form in 2 lines down the room? We have 1 too many girls. Well, never mind, Rosalie, I'll come in a minute. Now, girls, I'm going to teach you some of the old English folk dances. We'll learn 2 very simple ones today, and I'll teach you the movements, and then another time we'll learn more. One thing let me impress upon you now. You must never dance on your toes or point them, because that's not folk dancing. I'll tell you more about it when we've done some, and then you'll see what I mean. All face me. They turned and faced her in 2 long files. They were all interested, and 1 or 2 pupils were thrilled with excitement. Take hands, said Miss Durant. Now run 3 steps forward and then 3 back. Begin with your right foot, always, and don't bend your knees. Give in at the ankles. With shrieks of laughter they began, and soon they were running backwards and forwards as lightly as they could, while Miss Durant walked up and down, criticizing them. Don't point your toe, Wanda. Grizel, stop jumping. Run. Joey, you aren't an elephant, so don't try to be one. Straighter knees, Gisela. That's better. Come along, Rosalie. Try with me. 2 minutes later she stopped them. That's called leading up a double, she explained. If you do it without holding hands, it's called running up a double. Heaps of the dances begin in that way. Now join hands with your partner, and I'll teach you the slipping step. This was easier, and before long they were all slipping, first up and then down, while Miss Bettany played for them. Finally they learned setting to partners and turning single, and this last movement proved full of pitfalls for them. Joey, you aren't a spider, cried Miss Durant, and you'll certainly kick your next-door neighbor if you do it like that. Make your steps as neat as possible. You ought to be able to turn single in a soup plate. Turn to your right, child. This was to Evandine. Never turn singles to your left unless you're definitely told to do so. 4 steps, Grizel, not 2. Now, let's begin again and go straight through them. When finally they were all sure of those 5 more movements, Miss Durant turned her attention to skipping and had them all skipping round the room till they were breathless. Then she let them rest for a few minutes while she told them of Cecil Sharp and his great work of English folk dancing and England. You all know some of the folk songs, she concluded with a twinkle. I have even heard some of you objecting to the constant repetition of a few of them. Joey's Appalachian nursery song is very folk. Now, form your lines again, and I'll teach you the gallopade, and we won't go home till morning. Then 4 o'clock came, and they were all rosy and breathless with excitement, when Miss Durant gave the order to dismiss. They all crowded round her, begging for more. She laughed at them. Oh, you'll have a good deal of folk dancing, she assured them. Out here the weather is very violent here in the winter, so whenever you can't have walks or games, you will dance, and by next spring I hope you'll all know at least 2 to 20 dances. Coo, said Joe. That'll take some learning. But I like this. It's heaps more sensible than foxtrots and one-steps. I say, Gisela, something more for the mag. Gisela nodded. Yes, we must all teach the others what we have learned today. They all trooped off to tidy themselves for café. Chapter 6. The Salesian. The whole school was waiting in the big double form room by 9 o'clock the next morning. The wind was still blowing hard. It had veered to the north, so the lake path, though wet from the bath of the previous day, was not continually washed by the waves now, though the water meadows which lay between Seespitz and Tortswald were, to quote Joe, thoroughly squelchy. The 4-day girls who lived in the latter place had, therefore, managed to come, and Lisa, and the other one, was living at the post hotel, and had at school on the Friday afternoon. The wind had stopped blowing continuously, too, and only came in great gusts now. Between these, the juniors were rushed across to the chalet, even the Robin arriving without mishap. "I'm thankful to know that the mountains protected us from east winds," said Miss Bethany, as she stood at the window watching the angry waves tossing madly to and fro. "If it were not for them, I should be afraid that same day we should be washed away. We are very near the shore here, and the water is never more than a few inches below the path. Mercifully, ma chère, it is an impossibility," said Mademoiselle, to whom she had been speaking. "What are the children to do today?" "I hope the storm will have gone down by the afternoon," replied the head. "If it does, they shall have a long walk to the head of the valley. This morning they will have their meeting, and mending, and home letters. Tonight they shall dance and play games." "They are very much interested in this magazine," said Mademoiselle pensively. "Yes, thank goodness. It will give them something to think about." The school had no idea of the interest of the staff were taking in their latest venture. They assembled in the greatest excitement, and as usual, when they were in their places, Grizel was the first voice to be heard. "Joey Bettany," cried, "for goodness' sake, stop that wretched humming." "What for? I can hum if I like," protested Joey in injured tones. "No, you can't. You've got to think of other people a little. I'm sick to death of those ghastly Appalachian things. I wish Miss Maynard had never brought them to you." "'Twasn't one of the Appalachian songs," retorted Joe triumphantly. "Well, whatever it was, dry up. It's enough to make one's self ill." Luckily, Gisela saw fit to interfere, for the squabbling might have become serious. "Grizel, will you please sit down?" she said. "And Joey, we are going to discuss our magazine now." The pair subsided at once. Gisela was an excellent head girl, and knew how to make her authority felt. She gave the meeting no time to ponder on the wrangling, but plunged straight into the cause for it being held. "We wish, some of us, to have a school magazine," she began. "We shall arrange for it ourselves, and we shall have an account of our concerts and picnics and schoolwork. If we all hope that there may be stories and poems and letters to the editor before we go any further, we should like to know that you all wish such things. So, will anyone who does not please hold up their hands?" Needless to say, not a hand was raised. "It goes well," said Gisela. "Then we must now elect our editor." Joey rose to her feet. "I beg to propose Gisela Marini as editor," she said. "I'll second that," said Juliet, following up the proposal. Gisela shook her head. "It is very good of you. I am grateful, but indeed I should prefer that someone else had the position. I do not know enough about it, and I already have much to do." The members of the assembly looked at each other blankly. They had quite taken it for granted that Gisela would fill the post, and they had not troubled to think of anyone else for the job. There was silence. "What about Bernhilda?" asked Juliet at length, somewhat doubtful. The shy color flooded Bernhilda's face. "Oh, no, please no, I could not." "What about yourself?" demanded Grizel of Juliet. "If I was any use at English I might," replied that young lady. "As it is, you might as well have Robin for editor. She'd be as much use." There was giggling over this idea of Robin wielding the editorial pen, but they soon died as the girls once more faced the problem of editorship. A suggestion put forward by Wanda that Grizel might manage it was promptly squashed by Joey. "Grizel, she hasn't any more imagination than a cheese." "I've got common sense anyway," retorted Grizel hotly. That's better than— "Stop it, you two," interrupted Juliet. "If you want to scrap, you can do it outside." Once more the pair desisted, but there seemed a good deal of truth in Babette remarked the Bernhilda that Joey and Grizel were simply spoiling for a fight, and it would come off before the day was over. Then no less a person than Simone addressed the meeting. "Will not Joey do?" she asked shyly. "She speaks the English, she has the imagination, and she is not a prefect, as are Gisela and Bernhilda and Juliet and Bet and Gertrude, so she is not busy." There was a dubious pause. The idea certainly had its points, but to set against them was the fact that Joey was not 13 for a month yet, and she had no experience. Then Wanda spoke once more. "I think it is a good idea," she said. "Would not Miss Maynard help with it, so that Joey shall have not too big trouble to worry her?" "A bit muddled," remarked Joey genially, "but I see what you mean. I don't mind taking it on if Miss Maynard will give a hand with it. But I've never run a magazine before, any more than anyone else here, and I can't do it of my own bat. That's certain." Then Juliet had an inspiration. "Look here, why not divide it into pages, and give various people a page each to be responsible for? Then Joey would only have to collect the pages in and write her editorial and arrange the thing." They jumped at that suggestion, for there was common sense in this. It solved all their difficulties at one blow. The people who might feel too busy to tackle the whole magazine would scarcely grumble at having one page to look after. "Then shall we appoint Joey as the editor?" inquired Gisela. "Will you hold up your hands if you agree?" A forest of hands was promptly waved in the air, and the motion was carried. The next thing was to decide on the pages at the invitation of the prefects. Joey joined them on the little days and was called on to make suggestions. She screwed up her eyes, ran her fingers through her hair till it got into the wildest confusion, and then said, "Well, who will do the school notes? That's the first thing." "Gisela will, of course," said Juliet. "Grizel must do the sports page, and I propose that Bernhilda does the page on the folklore of districts. She must know heaps about it, because her father knows so many legends." "Oh, jolly good," declared the editor joyfully. "That's 3 pages settled then. Who's going to do the stories?" "Oh, has only one person to do the stories?" said little Amy Stevens disappointedly. "Oh, no, anyone can, but there must be someone to choose them," explained Joey. "Miss Maynard might do that," suggested Gisela, "and ought we not to ask the mistress to contribute to it?" "Yes, of course, and if any of you have interesting things to write about, you can write me a letter, and I'll put it in if it's decent enough," promised the editor kindly. "What about poetry?" someone wanted to know. "If we get anything good enough, we'll put it in." "And everything must of course be in English," added Gisela. "I think we ought to have all our contributions? Is that what you're driving at?" asked Joey. "Thank you, Joey. Yes, that is what I think. I think they ought to be in by the end of the month." "That's a fortnight," pondered the editor. "All right, October the 31st is the last day for sending things in, and they must be decently written, mind you." A tap at the door interrupted proceedings. Robin ran to open it. Miss Bettany was there. "Do you people know that it's nearly 11 o'clock?" she said. "Haven't you finished?" "Yes, thank you, madame," replied Gisela. "All is prepared, and Joey is the editor." "Joey!" The head had not expected this. "My dear girls, I don't want to interfere, but surely it would be better to have someone a little older." I am almost 13, said Joey a little resentfully. Also, madame, Joey has read so much, and we thought if Fraulein Menard would help her. We are to have pages, you see. I don't quite understand. Explain, please. Gisela explained, and Joey and Grizel supplemented her remarks. Don't you think we can manage? Asked the latter anxiously, when they had finished. The head nodded slowly. Yes, I think you can. It is a good idea to have the pages. I should think it would answer very well. Now come for your milk to the Spital, and then, if you seniors like to walk back with the Tortswald people as far as the Seespitz, you may. All except Grizel. She has a cold and will be better indoors today. Grizel made no attempt to question this decision. She knew a certain tone in Miss Bettany's voice, and there was no argument possible when it was heard. Us too? Questioned Margia. No, it's getting very wild now. If you people want to walk, you may go up the valley a little way, but you'll have to keep very tightly hold of each other. I think the wind must be veering round to the northeast, to judge by the lake and the trees. The juniors can't go at all, I'm afraid. And if the rest of you are going, you must hurry up about it and get ready. They ran off at full speed, and presently they were all standing ready, in long brown coats, brown tam-o'-shanters, and stout boots. Miss Maynard and Miss Durant were waiting for them, and as the former joined the lakeside walk, Gisela turned an imploring face to her head. Oh, madame, may Joey come with us? We can then talk about the magazine. Miss Bettany nodded. Very well. Don't get any wetter than you can help, though. Then they set off. The wind was blowing steadily again, and as Miss Bettany said, was coming from the northeast. Out on the lake the waves were big, considering that the Tarn Zee is only 3 miles in length, and never more than a mile wide. They formed a choppy sea, battling with the strong currents that flows about due north to keep the Tierne River below Scholastica. The path, barely 10 inches above the water's surface, was drenched with spray, and every now and then a wave larger than the rest would roll up and actually break on it, so that it was well under water. As long as they were in the Brassau triangle, this did not really matter, as they were able to get away from it on to the grass. But once they had passed the fence which divided the lake path from the peninsula, the mountainside rose steeply up from the path, and mostly they could do under the circumstances was to dash wildly to one side and wait there until the water has retreated, when they tore along again at full speed. As Miss Maynard afterwards said, whatever else you call it, it wasn't a walk. Oh, here's a big one coming, shrieked Joe, as a rather large wave than usual swept towards them. Oh, oh! Crash down it came. The water swirled over the road, and then receded. They all fled along into the direction of the Seespitz. Quick, girls, called Miss Maynard. Here's another one. Climb up onto those stones. They scrambled up, clinging to the rock wall, as another wave sent its volume over the way. Then down again, another wild scamper, this time finishing by the boat landing, where the mountain curved round and they were able to rush out of reach. Jo declared afterwards that it was the maddest walk she had ever taken, save one. Which was that? Asked Grizel with interest. Never you mind, Joey told her. But Grizel was in a teasing mood, and worried until her friend told her. One I took last term. Grizel went crimson. The previous term she had run away and tried to climb the great Ternjoch, with results that were very nearly disastrous, for a mist had come down and she had found herself on the verge of a precipice. Joey had come after her and had succeeded in keeping her quiet until help came, but Grizel herself had gone down with bronchitis and for 3 days they had feared brain fever for Joey. It was not an exploit of which Grizel was proud, and she would have liked to forget it. Jo had had no thought of unkindness when she had referred to it, and at the sight of Grizel's face she promptly declared herself to be a beast. "It is all over," said Gisela, who had overheard her conversation. "But, Joey, we have still not talked with Miss Maynard about the magazine." "Well, how could we?" demanded the editor. "Going was bad enough, but coming back was the limit. We had the wind against us the whole time, and the lake got wilder and wilder. Shall we go to her now?" asked the head girl. "Righto," agreed Joey easily. They went to the little music room where they knew Miss Maynard was to be found and tapped on the door. "Come in," she called. Then, as they entered, "Well, what can I do for you?" "It's the magazine," explained Jo. "Will you help us?" "Yes, of course. What do you want? Sit down and tell us." They sat down, and Joey poured out her plans. Gisela explained here and there, rather a necessary thing, for Joey, enthusiastic, was very apt to be incoherent. When they had finished, Miss Maynard nodded. "I see," she said thoughtfully. "You really want me to act as final court of appeal." "Yes, I suppose so." But Joey looked rather crestfallen. "Well, what else did you want me to do?" demanded the young mistress. "It's your magazine, and you've got to manage it. I'll be there when I am needed, but you must do the work yourselves." Joey got to her feet. "Thank you, Miss Maynard," she added. "Come on, Gisela. I'm going to begin now."